Do you reckon increasing the number of dwellings allowed per hectare across large areas such as entire local government areas would help the housing crisis? As the great Australian dream of owning a home becomes increasingly out of reach for so many people, well, all ideas are pretty much in the mix, aren't they? The Committee for Economic Development has got a new report tabling some reforms like what they're calling gentle density. That sounds intriguing, doesn't it? Let's find out about that. Danica Adams is a senior economist with CEDA and joins us on our program this morning. Danica, thanks for doing that. Good morning.
Good morning, Paul.
What is gentle density?
Yeah, that's a great question. Look, we often get caught up in the debate when we talk about increasing density. It's usually quite a binary choice between our high-rise apartments, which we do see in and around the Newcastle CBD area, and then in outer areas we see the single houses on the larger blocks. Now, what we're looking at is the middle of that. We're looking at increasing the number of houses on the blocks in the areas that are already well located and well serviced. This can be duplexes, triplexes, it can be townhouses and, low-rise apartment buildings.
It's a perennial problem, though, isn't it? You've got lots of space where all of the facilities are. It's a bit sad to look at single resident households, massive households built around schools back in the days when those suburbs were first established, of course, and necessary, likewise with hospitals and other public infrastructure. But as time goes on, of course, there's less demand from the occupants for many of those services that are available. But what's the optimum level of density? Because people are entitled to say, aren't they, look, I moved here because of the trees and the space.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, there is no optimal level. I think this is really just about giving people a choice. Some people certainly want an apartment and some people certainly want one house on a big block, but there are a lot of people who perhaps can't afford those single houses on the big blocks, and people should be afforded that choice of where it is they want to live. We know we want to live near the amenities and our families. We often want to live and locate ourselves near our families. So it's really just about trying to provide as much choice as we can and as much supply as we can in the housing market.
If the choice is there, it'll be embraced organically, you reckon? The problem will kind of sort itself out. We won't be forcing people to do things that they don't want to do?
I just don't think as Australians we very often do that, Paul. I think if the choice is there, and certainly the feedback we've received from this report is people would take it up, particularly the young people who, like I said, can't afford those big houses on the large blocks.
What's the feedback to these smaller lot sizes? Because even subdivisions, the green space that's being developed, we're seeing blocks that historically would have been a quarter acre or, 700 to 800 square metres are now down around 350, 400, 450. What's been the pushback against that? Can people live their lives comfortably within those smaller spaces?
Yeah, look, that is a really great point. We do see the new areas being developed at a much smaller rate. So we know we need to because we're doing it, and we know we can. The sky certainly hasn't fallen in these areas and people are living great lives there. So we know it is possible. It's just good planning is really important when we do start to reduce the sizes. And as long as we do that well, then absolutely this level of density will be perfect.
Danica, we're seeing that also with zero lot developments where houses, particularly garages, are constructed right on the boundary of the property, where historically there might have been, a 900 millimetre setback or 3 feet in the old money, of course. Is that working okay? Are we able to design around privacy so that people are not getting the imposition of having their neighbours living on top of them?
Yeah, certainly. I think each local government has its own rules. So as long as we've got some rule that seems to work well, I can't obviously comment because it's different across the whole country. But the changes that have been made, we haven't seen any problems with. It is really just the legacy regulation that's the problem there.
Danica, we love the fact that this country is so large and so spacious. But in relative terms, our density is a lot lower than other countries, isn't it, when we look even at the major cities?
Yeah, absolutely. So our major cities, we have some of the most populated cities, and then our density, though, is in the bottom 100. While our cities like Sydney is significantly dense and quite high up in terms of international cities density, in terms of how dense it actually is when we compare to the rest of the world, it's incredibly, incredibly low density.
Danica, one of the reactions to changes in housing and planning rules, of course, has been a little bit of resentment in local communities where state governments are usurping the authority of local councils. Is that a good or a bad thing? Do we need to kind of bring local councils into line, do you think, and make them, play the big picture a little more effectively?
Yeah, look, I think there are certainly local governments across our whole country that do this really well. They have, off their own bat, increased density, changed their planning regulations, and are already doing it. But we know there are local governments also that are resistant. We can't have a number of local governments doing all the heavy lifting. We really do need everyone to pitch in here. We are in a housing crisis. So when the state governments do step in, it is generally a last resort situation. They have been through a lot of other options first, but we do really need everyone across the country to be pitching in.
And just one final point. What about changes to related bodies and institutions? I know, for example, that the banks, until recently, wouldn't lend on bed-sitters and one-bedroom flats. They simply didn't see the value in or the capacity to protect their investment.
Yeah, look, this isn't something we looked at in this report, but we do know that finance products are changing in line with, and when I think about this, I think particularly about prefabricated homes. The banks are keeping up with the changes in our preferences.
Okay. Danica, good to get your input today. Thanks so much.
Thanks so much for having me, Paul.
Danica Adams is a senior economist with the Committee for Economic Development Australia.